with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, October 29th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, 11 dead in Pittsburgh, Jewish synagogue massacre. Meanwhile, the shooter, inspired by the right's immigration demagoguery and Soros demonization, read anti-Semitism. Meanwhile, fascism takes power in Brazil, the fifth largest national economy in the world. Trump promises a trip to Pittsburgh. Local Jews and about 16,000 other people sign an open letter saying, don't come unless you denounce your white nationalism. The MAGA bomber apparently radicalized by the Trump election. Meanwhile, in other news, California's net neutrality law challenged by the DOJ and its partners at AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast. And, of course, the Pentagon sends extra troops to the U.S.-Mexican border to stop the imminent invasion that we are told is coming. All this and more on today's program. We had, a slightly different show anticipated today, but we've ditched the interview that we were going to have because it would seem sort of ridiculous in light of the what happened this weekend. And obviously, I think people are quite aware of the news. 46-year-old man, Robert Bowers, shot 11 congregants in a temple called, I think it's the Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, a conservative temple, conservative in terms of its Jewish denomination, not necessarily its politics. The dead ranged in age from mid-50s to mid-90s. I think a woman who was a Holocaust survivor, actually. And my understanding is it was Shabbat services, but also there may have been a bris at the time. Four police officers also shot. The man was taken into custody. He had 21 guns registered in his name. He used an AR-15 style assault rifle and 3 handguns, according to authorities. He was loudly spewing murderous hatred and bigotry online, and as he went into the church, apparently said something to the effect of "all Jews must die." The guy's social media accounts, particularly at gab.com, had all sorts of white nationalist memes. He claimed Donald Trump's he claimed Donald Trump was not a white nationalist. That he was a globalist. I'm hearing myself come back. Whoever's got that's got to turn it down. He claimed that Donald Trump was under the was under the influence of Jews and was basically a figurehead, was not doing enough to stop the caravan that was coming of immigrants who represented an invasionary force that was driven by Jews. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, that narrative that there is a caravan. In fact, this guy went in and on Gab.com, he was repeatedly railing against the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, I guess, which is a Jewish refugee advocacy group. There is a fairly robust tradition in Jewish Jewish institutions that work on immigration for, I think, fairly obvious reasons. HAES was founded in 1881. There have been various instances around the world where Jews have had to leave countries because of local repression. HAES has partnered with the U.S. government in the past to help resettle refugees. They initially started as an organization that helped Jews and expanded their work to just refugees writ large. According to this guy, Bowers, he accused HAES of helping transport members of the migrant caravans, supposedly showing the organizer a video that showed the organization's members working at the U.S.-Mexico border. He accused them of driving this invasion, and this is all on his Gab profile. He was HAES. He accused the HAES of working with the State Department. And HAES has actually worked with the U.S. government, I imagine, the State Department, to help resettle refugees as part of the refugee admissions program. Of course, many of those refugees we're down to like literally 5,000 or 8,000 that we're going to allow into the country this year because of Donald Trump's so-called nationalism. But if the notion that this guy Bowers promotes, that the so-called migrant caravan that is walking through Mexico, perhaps to the United States. There are plenty of these caravans that we've had in the past. All you need to do is search caravans and Tucker Carlson, and you could see him reporting on these over the past couple of years. All the different invasions that we've had. And amazingly, we're still here, and I'm still speaking English, and we're not doing this through ham radio. This isn't a Red Dawn scenario. But apparently to this guy it was. And if you're wondering, like, where could someone possibly get this idea? Or at the very least, they're not seeing this validated anywhere, are they? Like on Fox News?
I've gotten so many email from people who said, don't call it a caravan, call it an invasion.
Yes.
Is that fair?
Of course it is. It is a full-scale invasion by a hostile force, and it requires our president and our commander-in-chief to use any means necessary.
Pause it for 1 second. Now, when Michelle Malkin says a full-scale invasion, let's just assume that we're talking about this caravan here of, let's just assume there's 4,000 people, maybe less, but let's just assume it's 4,000. And we have heard in other clips from Seb Gork saying that these are all, that many of them are military age men. They are walking on foot, many of them carrying their toddler or elementary school aged kids. What does a full-scale invasion look like? Does it include by land, by sea, by air, long-range weapons, short-range weapons? Because these folks have none of it. Well, they have the land part. They're walking. They have no vehicles. But this is a full-scale invasion by a hostile force. A hostile force that wants to come here and work here, which is a weird thing to imagine that being the number one agenda of a hostile force. But that's what they are. It's a full-scale invasion, hostile force. Why wouldn't you go grab some arms to fight this, right? When has it been that the United States of America have been facing a full-scale invasion by a hostile force? Full scale.
By a hostile force, and it requires our president and our commander-in-chief to use any means necessary to protect our sovereignty. The reason that I called my book Invasion 16 years ago is because of Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. And people never talk about this anymore. The constitutional imperative to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, the people who are already here. And if that means troops on the border, yes. The problem is, of course, that the troops, because of the Posse Comitatus Act, can only serve in an administrative or support capacity. It's really a Band-Aid, and the underlying solution...
Is that the problem? That the troops at the border can't open fire on people? That's the problem. That's the problem that we have. That the troops can't fire. They can only function in an administrative function to these hostile invaders who are involved in a full-scale invasion. You see where this is going, folks? This is, incidentally... This is, Fox and Friends? This is the light show. This is the morning show.
Of course, is to finish the wall and to put more Border Patrol agents on the border. And ranchers and families have been calling for that for the 3 decades that I've been covering this issue.
Yes, 3 decades of just hyping and hyping this. And now we have a president who's fully on board with the idea that we're being involved in a full-scale invasion, supposedly, right? Supposedly. Where could this idea, though? So we have multiple sources, including some of the highest echelons of conservative thought and Republican media in this country are suggesting that we're suffering a full-scale invasion from a hostile force. But where would someone get the idea that this is maybe a function of the Jews? Well, I mean, certainly it lives in white nationalist lore. The John Birch Society has been saying this. But where in the popular, culture could people get this notion? I got a piece here. This was written, I guess a while ago, maybe a year or two ago, about white nationalism. And it's written by a guy named Eric Ward. He wrote this in the Public Eye magazine in the summer 2017 edition. I think he works at the Southern Poverty Law Center now, or he did then. And he's an African-American guy who, in the course of working on anti-racist activism, went undercover at a weekend in 1995 in a convention center in Seattle, which was the 6th Annual Preparedness Expo. And it's basically preparing people for political and economic collapse. And you could buy white nationalist classics like The Secret of the Federal Reserve in 52 and from 67, The Biological Jew. And he writes, despite its blood-curdling anti-black racism, at least some factions of the white nationalist movement saw me as a potential ally against their true arch-enemy. Apparently went in as a black separatist, and he told the guys, like, I don't shake white people's hands. And this guy he was talking to was like, that's cool. They went to go hear Jack Lamb, who was a Phoenix cop who ran an organization called Police Against the New World Order, make a case for temporary alliances with the blacks, the Mexicans, the Orientals against the real enemy, the federal government controlled by an international conspiracy. He didn't have to say who ran this conspiracy because it was obvious to all in attendance. He goes on to write, if I had to give a basic definition of the movement, something I've been asked to do formally and informally by folks who have spent less time hanging out with Nazis than I have, my response today would not be much different than it was when I began to do this work nearly 30 years ago. American white nationalism, which emerged in the wake of the 1960s civil rights struggle and descends from white supremacism, is a revolutionary social movement committing to building a whites-only nation, and anti-Semitism forms its theoretical core. Now, why would that be? He writes to recognize that anti-Semitism is not a sideshow to racism within white nationalist thought. This is particularly white nationalist thought, like Steve Bannon. It allows us to identify the fuel that white nationalist ideology uses to power its anti-black racism, contempt for other people of color, and its xenophobia, as well as the misogyny and other forms of hatred it holds dear. And how does it do this? What function does anti-Semitism serve? Well, one, it answers the question, how could a race of inferiors, that being basically people of color, unseated the power structure through organizing alone? For that matter, how could feminists and LGBTQ people have upended traditional gender relations? Muslims have won billions of converts to Islam. How do you explain the boundary crossing allure of hip-hop, the election of a black president? It's some secret cabal, some mythological power that must be manipulating the social order behind the scenes. That's what the Jews do for the white nationalists. They give an excuse for why they are losing because they have been stabbed in the back by people who have snuck into the power structure and are using all these other dupes as a way of controlling things. Jews function, he writes, for today's white nationalists, as they often have for anti-Semites throughout the centuries, as the demons stirring and otherwise changing and heterogeneous pot of lesser evils. He writes that the second reason the white nationalist anti-Semitism must not be dismissed, at the bedrock of the movement is an explicit claim that Jews are a race of their own, and that their ostensible position as white folks in the U.S. represents the greatest trick the devil ever played. The Bible for generations of white nationalists is the Turner Diaries. You may remember that because that was basically the controlling, structure of everything, not just Timothy McVeigh, but also Glenn Beck was operating under for years. And this is a dystopian novel by the white supremacist leader William Pierce, published under the pseudonym Andrew MacDonald. And this is where a soldier in the white Revolutionary Army insists that trying to distinguish the good Jews from the bad ones is absurd, the way some of our thicker-skulled good old boys still insist on trying to separate the good ends from the rest of their race. He writes, contemporary anti-Semitism then does not just enable racism, it is also racism. For the white nationalist imaginary, Jews are a race, and the race that presents an existential threat to whiteness. Anyways, this is the thoughts of this guy from a theoretical standpoint, I guess, though also based upon his day-to-day research with these people. But where can we see this notion that Jews are pulling the strings? I mean, it's at least, it's like, it's one thing that it's confined to these sort of John Birch pamphlets and Elders of the Protocol of Zion pamphlets that are out there purporting to show the Jews are trying to tear down great nations through immigration. But one couldn't see this trafficked, let's say, on a daily basis, except for, when was this? Last week?
Sure. Look, this is a criminal involvement on the part of these leftist groups. It's
pause it for 1 second. This is Lou Dobbs on Fox Business Network talking to this guy from the Judicial Watch, Chris Farrell, who apparently, you should know, Fox has now said can't come on our network.
Sure. Look, this is a criminal involvement on the part of these leftist groups. It's a highly organized, very elaborate, sophisticated operation. I have that from the highest levels of the Guatemalan government. They're investigating those groups criminally, and I strongly urge President Trump and Attorney General Sessions to do the same here. A lot of these folks also have affiliates who are getting money from the Soros-occupied State Department, and that is a very great concern. You want to start cutting money there.
Do you know? So, in other words, let's just review here. This guy has sources at the highest levels of the Guatemalan government who are telling him that this is a very sophisticated international cabal of people who are orchestrating this, what we were told by Michelle Malkin on the Light show on Fox, was that we're dealing with a full-scale invasion from a hostile, with hostile intent. And the State Department's been infiltrated by this demonized George Soros, who was also, incidentally, just coincidentally this week, targeted in a bombing attack, or would-be bombing attack. And this guy's out there promulgating this stuff. This is all part of the white nationalist formula. And this is what it's getting trafficked on a daily basis. And we hear, let's just listen to one more time here. We have, here is Hugh Hewitt. And this was what? Friday afternoon, I think it was. Friday afternoon. This is before the attack on the synagogue. Back when there was just 12 or 13 bombs. I think we're at the 13th now, but at the time I think it was 12. Sent to the leaders of the Democratic Party. Then some African-American congresspeople, perceived as, at the top leadership, I guess. Maxine Waters, I guess, part of the leadership. But then a couple other administrative figures, and, of course, George Soros. And here is MSNBC on Meet the Press Daily, making it mostly like a he said, she said type of situation.
A couple of things on this.
Hold on. Here's Stephanie Cutter with Hugh Hewitt.
A couple of things on this. In terms of what Jeff said, he never gets to the point where he follows the traditions and conventions of how you expect a president to act. I think it's more than that. He never does the right thing. Regardless of what the traditions and conventions are of being a president, he never does the right thing. He never takes the road. There were two former presidents that were targeted with pipe bombs. I've worked for both of those presidents. I can't imagine either one of them not calling and checking on someone, making sure they're okay, showing empathy and concern. We got none of that from this president. And Hugh, I appreciate you're trying to throw everybody into the same bucket, but that's an impossible thing to do. This president has incited violence. He has, people at his rallies. He talks about punching people in the face. He throws people out. This is how he won the presidency. The politics of fear. There is no equivalent in the Democratic Party.
There is an equivalent. There's the man screaming at Mitch McConnell in the restaurant. There is Maxine Waters encouraging people
at a
which
restaurant
violates 18 U.S.C. 351. If we go back to the statute,
we can talk about that, but we're talking about the President of the United States. Are you saying you don't
behavior
agree
by all public
that this
officials.
man has
one standard? Incendiary behavior by any public official ought to be held to the same
I'll make sure that
standard.
nobody screams at a Democratic rally, lock him up.
No, I'm talking about the guy in McConnell's face. What did you think of that, Stephanie? Should he have been arrested under 18 U.S.C. 351?
For screaming at Mitch McConnell.
And banging on the table and throwing his food.
Pause it. I mean, you see what Hugh Hewitt's doing here? First of all, Hugh Hewitt doesn't even know the man's name. This man of great import who is sending a broader message to the entire... He doesn't even know his name. And he's playing this game... Get Stephanie Cutter to say that this guy should be arrested for this violation. Being rude to a senator. And the idea that this is being platformed in any way. Because we literally this week, the conversation they're having is about what the implications of platforming this at the highest level of the government does to lunatics out there. But let's hear Hugh Hewitt try and justify how there's some type of equivalency here.
Arrested under 18 U.S.C. 351.
For screaming at Mitch McConnell.
And banging on the table and throwing his food.
I think it's wholly inappropriate. I think that nobody should act that way. But I think you're right. Nobody should act that way. That is a constituent or whatever you want to call him, not the President of the United States.
Susan Collins getting an envelope with rice in it.
Right, that's wrong.
It's everywhere.
But
I just want to say one rule.
But
it's everywhere.
Who do you think incites that violence the most?
I do not blame the president at all.
You don't blame the president
not the
at
most.
all.
Everyone uses this rhetoric these days, especially on cable channels.
No,
yes,
they do not.
It's just absolutely garbage and BS. And someone like that comes on and just delivering that garbage and BS. Why do you let them on? Why do you let them on? Why do you let that be just like, this is really just about who can make the better debate? So with that backdrop, on Friday night, I was on Chris Hayes' program. And so Friday night, with the backdrop of seeing someone like Hugh Hewitt on MSNBC making some type of equivalency between somebody upsetting Mitch McConnell's dinner by banging on his table or saying your food is bad or saying shame is literally someone, we don't even know the name. No one, I haven't heard the name, is the equivalent of the president going on national television, talking about doing violent things, excusing violent things, seeing the entire Republican media apparatus talk about a caravan as being a full-scale invasion with military-age males with hostile intent. We're talking about families who are walking on foot a month away from the United States, creating the sense that we are under siege. And then I was on MSNBC with Barbara Boxer, who is always the favorite of mine, of the two California senators, I should say. She had this to say, and I hopped on my hobby horse about the problem being much more problematic, much larger than Donald Trump, or well, play the tape.
You know, he and I are about the same age. I'm a little older, but we're about the same vintage. And we lived through 3 assassinations of leaders, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. And to think that his response to this is to double down on going after the press, not to look at the people and say, you know what, I get heated sometimes if my rhetoric had anything to do with it. We are dealing with someone who is a bully inside and out, has no compassion, didn't even mention the names of 2 former presidents. We've only had 45. And this bomber who did the act, let's be clear, he did the act, the bomber did. The roadmap was the President of the United States and everyone that he singled out for hatred. So the politics of hatred, when practiced by a president, has resulted in a nightmare for our nation. And we have a president who has to be checked and balanced in this next election.
Pause it for 1 second. And I agreed with everything she said there about Donald Trump. But the issue that I took was that that's not nearly an exhaustive list of the people who are responsible for this. Continue.
This next election.
Sam.
Yeah, I mean, even if someone wants to make the bizarre claim that there was no relationship between what Donald Trump has been doing and what this guy did, Donald Trump's actions after the fact, to not even call the former president of the United States, to not even call the former secretary of state, to not even to say, like, we are committed to protecting you people, is basically sending the message to the other potential bombers out there, hey, you know, I don't blame you. I can understand why you would do this. A, and B, I'm at the point like where the outrage about Donald Trump is useless. Mm-hmm. There are people who have enabled him, who continue to enable him for their own political and, frankly, money profit. And those people are members of the Republican Party. They are the leadership of the Republican Party.
And the conservative establishment and the conservative media.
Establishment, they heard when Donald Trump said, hey, if you beat up that protester, I'll cover your lawsuit. I mean, they still rallied behind this guy. Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, every other Republican leadership should have to answer more than he does. They need to come up and deal with it.
Yeah, what do you think of that, Senator?
Well, absolutely. That's why we are having an election.
Right.
It's a midterm. It's not an election where Donald Trump is physically on the ballot, but his style of politics, the politics of fear and hate, and we see the result of that, that is on the ballot. And I have to say this. There are many issues that are going to impact people. This is one of them. We have to look deeper inside the Republican Party. Not only are they enablers, but they want to take away things from the people of America, their Social Security, their Medicare, their health care. We are not going to forget about that. This man must be checked. And yes, it all lies with the House and Senate leadership. We need to take back both the House and the Senate to restore sanity to this country, to restore hope for this country.
Well, I mean, first off, with all due respect to the former senator, that will not restore sanity in this country.
Well, I don't agree with you, sir.
The Democrats
I don't agree with you.
Okay, that's fine. But the Democrats can take back the House. But just like when Barack Obama thought that this would break the fever, this is not going to break the fever. The establishment of this country, we all know who they are. They sit in seats in these rooms as well. They need to start holding the Republican leadership to account, not just implore people to go and vote. This isn't a question of people going voting. You saw the assessments of those people in line at the rally. They thought it was, you know, Bernie Sanders.
What I'm talking about there is they had just played a clip of, and I think we have this, of what the people in line think about these bombers. They think that these bombers are, and we'll play it in a bit later, but they think that Barack Obama sent it to himself. And my point was not that we shouldn't go out and vote, but that we're on MSNBC on Chris Hayes' program, and the percentage of people who are watching this program who are planning not to vote is somewhere between 0% and immeasurably small. Everyone watching Chris Hayes is going to vote. I would say it's arguable whether or not a majority of people a week before the election who are watching Chris Hayes have already voted. They're the first persons in line to early voting. The problem was earlier in the day in that studio, Hugh Hewitt was allowed to come and spew his false equivalency. That Paul Ryan can hide out wherever he's hiding out and say, this is real reprehensible. I don't know how this happened. And Mitch McConnell can be there. Or that Dianne Feinstein is not getting the message from Barbara Boxer that, hey, you should be calling out every one of the members of the Senate right now for not standing up and saying, we're done. We're not showing up to vote on anything. Continue.
The assessments of those people in line at the rally, they thought it was, Bernie Sanders, or they thought that Barack Obama had mailed this to themselves. The reporters in this country, the establishment media figures who even entertained the notion of some type of false equivalency between upsetting Mitch McConnell at a restaurant, some nameless person protesting at a restaurant, versus the President of the United States not even telling people of this country, you shouldn't have done this.
Right.
That nobody should do this. We are beyond, the election is one thing, but make no mistake about it, sanity will not return if the Democrats take the House or the Senate.
Let me say this.
The election isn't one thing. The election is the thing. You can write your columns, and I used to be a reporter, and I love to write. You can go on television. The people have the power. You got to take away the power from the Mitch McConnells, from the Paul Ryans, from the Dean Hellers, and I could go on. And the only way to do that is the vote, because all this outrage doesn't mean anything if they are in power.
I will say this. My own take on this is that it's necessary but not sufficient, right?
It's necessary but not sufficient. He's correct. But the bottom line is, it's not just a question. First off, it's not just a question of taking away the power from these Republicans, because there's no way to take away all their power. This is a cultural problem. And to the extent that there's anything that any of us sitting in that room or on that television on MSNBC can do to diminish the power of Donald Trump, it is to take our access for the highest levels of our government and tell them that they are being shameful. Now, none of those people are going to listen to me. Of the three of us sitting on that studio, none of them are going to listen to me. But they may listen to a former senator. So, with all due respect to Barbara Boxer, of whom I have great admiration, but whatever relationships, whatever she got as a senator, where it's like, my good colleague from so-and-so or whatnot, to think that this is just about electing a Democratic Congress. And I agree. Every single person in the sound of my voice should vote. And again, I would be willing to bet that 99% of them are. But the elite of this country have to step up and start holding their fellow elite to account, even if it means they won't be able to lobby other senators. They won't be able to go to the same parties. They won't be held in the same esteem. They have to expend some of their cachet, their social cachet, for the betterment of the country. And stop clinging on to this sort of... The New York Times posted a headline. Do we have a copy of that headline? On that day, on Friday, they were sent pipe bombs. Hear what they've said about Trump. A look at the contentious words between the president and some of his most outspoken critics. Now they changed that headline to, here's what they've said about Trump and what Trump said about them. But Sam Seder can sit here and say, hey, that's BS. It doesn't matter what these people have said about Donald Trump in the course of politics. None of it was eliminationist. None of it justifies getting sent a pipe bomb in the mail. Sometimes when you frame certain things in that way, it communicates a certain perspective, that it legitimizes certain things. Sam Seder can talk about this, and guess who cares? No one. I mean, I like to think maybe you people care, but if Barbara Boxer says, on national television, I call out the New York Times right now. This is irresponsible. And they've got to behave better. That makes a difference. There is no one, again, with all due respect to Senator Boxer, there is no one who is watching Chris Hayes on a Friday night who her exhortations to vote are going to make a difference. They're already voting. If anybody knows her name, they're voting. Yeah. And so the bottom line is use the assets you have. Instead of telling people that is all that is necessary is voting, it may be the only thing they can do in the next 10 days. And that's fine. But you should do what you can do, which is far more than just voting. It is actually bringing some of your social assets to bear on what is an increasingly dangerous situation. And they're not doing it.
You need to disrupt norms to save norms. We keep saying that.
Yeah. They also ran that headline where they referred to Bolsonaro as a divisive populist, which, like, you would think that getting literal bombs sent in the mail to mainstream media outlets would make them think maybe these people don't deserve equal time. But
yeah, it's absurd. But
the false equivalency is maddening.
It's maddening. And it is maddening to see the people who really have the ability. I mean, really, let's face it. There's no amount of, yes, it would be great if all the New York Times subscribers on next Monday decided to send an email to the Times. I'm canceling my subscriptions because of your false equivalency, but that's not going to happen. But the ability for people like Senator Boxer, and I'm not calling her out in particular, it just so happens that we had this conversation, but there's a lot more of them. Call out people on that network and say, why are you hosting shows to promote false equivalency? I mean, imagine for a moment if a former senator was watching, let's say, the Sunday version of Meet the Press, and they were aware of Erick Erickson, who was the guy who got famous by calling Chief Justice Souter a goat effer. Yeah, that was the way that he got his claim to fame. And he has been engaged in a list of conspiracy peddling that it's almost hard for me to actually enumerate. I have a piece here somewhere about it, but let's listen to what he has to say.
Theories on your site. Mm-hmm.
Here he is. This is on Chuck Todd's Meet the Press. They have introduced Erick Erickson to talk about the dangers of conspiracy theories.
Eric, I'm curious. So you've had to deal with conspiracy theories on your site. Mm-hmm. You've been sometimes people get mad at you thinking you help traffic these conspiracy theories, and I know that there are others that are.
Pause it. Sometimes people think that just come out and say it. You've trafficked these. You have trafficked in these. Good.
But whose job is it to get rid of some of this stuff? Whose job is it to purge this stuff? Whose job is it to educate Americans to facts?
I think we all have an obligation here. I mean, just let me address conservatives for a minute. Last week, you had a lot of people pushing maybe this bomber was...
Rush Limbaugh was pushing it, Eric.
You had a lot of people who were pushing this theory. Now we know the facts. Now we know the facts, and yet there are still people pushing this. I got to tell you...
Pause it. So what Erick Erickson is saying is look, the first reaction... It's perfectly legitimate to have a wild conspiracy theory. I mean, for instance, like the caravan. This is a tweet. Now, I didn't see this one because Erick Erickson blocked me years ago, but this was from a week ago. It's not a coincidence that this caravan to the south of us is happening 2 weeks before our federal elections. If you want to bring Erick Erickson on to your television program, ask him what he means by this. What does that mean? It's not a coincidence. Is he suggesting that these Guatemalans and Hondurans who started this caravan weeks and weeks ago and could not make it to the United States until weeks after the election, I mean, that this was like some type of, they timed this out, or did someone else have this idea? Did someone else who had knowledge of our election say, we've got to gin this up down there, we'll get this caravan going? I mean, it would be irresponsible not to speculate. The idea that it could be a coincidence? It's not a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. Or what about this? Erick Erickson, note to reporters. A growing body of blogs are posting that Kavanaugh's mother presided over the foreclosure of Christine Blasey Ford's childhood home, or at a minimum, her parents' home. I encourage you to honestly vet this, as it could explain motive or fuel conspiracy. Oh, I wonder how people could hear about that conspiracy. Oh, you just told it to us. Well, I'm sure all the people on those blogs, those right-wing blogs, will read what the Washington Post has to say about that. Or when it turns out that there was actually, two different people named Ford who were judges. I'm sure Erick Erickson addressed that on his Twitter feed.
He deleted those tweets.
Oh, did he? Huh. Wow. David Hogg contradicts himself in 2 separate interviews about whether he was at school during the shooting. And no, this isn't a fake news gateway pundit BS story. It's actually an Erick Erickson Red State BS story. Now, maybe it's unfair to look back a matter of months where there's 3 distinct episodes where Erick Erickson has peddled in conspiracy theories. Or maybe there's this. If reporters really cared about children, they'd also be yelling at Planned Parenthood, asking why they're selling baby body parts and turning a blind eye to child victims of sex trafficking. Yeah, I'm serious. Look at it. Now, granted, that was all the way back in June of 2018. That's all the way back almost 5 months ago.
So it had been fully debunked for 1.5 years versus 2 years?
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get back to him on Meet the Press talking about how the right needs to give up their conspiracy theories after they've been debunked.
Theory. Now we know the facts. Now we know the facts, and yet there are still people pushing this. I got to tell you that from my perspective, when we know all the facts now about the guy last week, and you're still pushing this theory, you're at war with the truth. And if you're a conservative who's at war with the truth, you're not really being conservative.
Pause it. To be conservative, in other words, means you put out a conspiracy theory, no matter how insane it is, based on no facts. No facts, right? Because it's not true. So it couldn't have been based on facts. It was based on conjecture and sloppy, fictionalizing.
That's all fair play.
That's conservative. But once someone in the mainstream media presents the facts in a way that I believe them, then after that it's not conservative, even though every single conservative outlet will carry it.
Wait, this is the new dispute in conservatism?
Apparently.
Do you do reckless conspiracy theories forever? Or do you stop at some point when it becomes like just embarrassing?
I am willing to bet.
That's the big division.
I am willing to bet. I don't have the time to do this. But over the course of Erick Erickson's radio and print career, that he has talked about Vince Foster. Because certainly his idol, Rush Limbaugh, has. And that was disproven 30 some odd years ago, 20 some odd years ago. Any more to this? All right, let's listen to more of this. Because this is the part where Chuck Todd says, hey, I don't know why we invited you on the show.
You're at war with the truth. And if you're a conservative who's at war with the truth, you're not really being conservative.
Rush Limbaugh was questioning the stickers on the van.
Across the board, we saw a bunch of conservatives doing this. Now we know the facts. The question is,
I will
do they continue?
never criticize
The problem
Rush Limbaugh.
is, in this situation, we have a lot of people who no longer trust the media. They don't trust institutions. They don't trust their neighbor. We've gone inward. Unfortunately, I do think it's going to be an external threat that brings us together. There is nothing left in this country that unifies us as a whole. We all have our own different media outlets. We have our social media outlets. We have our people we engage
Pause it.
with. And
Remember, this is the guy who pushed a conspiracy theory and said, "Oh, the media that my audience doesn't believe, they should be the ones who vet it." Talk about a disingenuous F. I mean, give me a break. And if the elite in this country do not at least use their elite status to put pressure on these other elites to clamp down on this, guess what? It ain't happening. Bottom line, it ain't happening. All right, we got to take a break, head into the fun half. It's ugly, folks. And, there's no reason to believe. If we're lucky, the Democrats take the House. Super lucky, they take the House and the Senate. But there's no reason to believe they're going to stop this. I mean, usually... And this is why the Department of Homeland Security in 2009 leaked a report that was a warning of a rise in right-wing extremist activity. And conservatives attacked the report and made the Obama administration basically quash it. And now under Trump, of course, they don't even investigate these guys. They pulled all the FBI resources. But usually during a Republican administration, this stuff dies down. But the level in which Donald Trump has promoted this stuff, and more importantly, the willingness for all the supposed controls that exist for a guy like this, have basically waved it all in. There was a lot of people who thought oh, well, Trump is a nightmare, but they'll put him, they'll control him. And to the extent that they'll control him, yeah, maybe insofar as we're still going to get tax cuts. But this stuff that is, are we going to go against his electoral base? No, that's our base too. We're going to promote it.
They learned.
In fact,
they learned.
This is the only thing that could save the Senate. This is the only thing that could save the House. If we gin up this notion that we're under invasion, we're about to be invaded. And our dupes are going to believe it. We're going to get invaded. Yeah, maybe we'll deal with the problems with that later. That people think we're going to get invaded.
Later is now.
Yeah.
They've been doing this shit for years.
And why would they?
And now it's coming home to roost.
And if you're not calling it out, and you're in a position to call it out that it makes a difference. I mean, we can all sit here and rail against it all day. But if you're in a position where you're calling it out would make a news story, and you're not doing that, you're the one who's dropping the ball. Not the 0.0001% of people who are watching Chris Hayes and not voting. You.
It just seems so condescending, the vote thing, because what it feels like to me is in an emergency and you have children, you want to give them a task that they can focus on to sort of give them something to do and not worry about. That's what it feels like they're giving. Just vote, and then we got the rest of it, right?
Right.
It also feels like she's kind of delusional there.
Well, I understand that she's out there and thinking that her message has to be get people to vote, but I'm sorry. You need to step back and get focus on what your context is and what value you bring to this. I mean, this is, this same thing about I've had this conversation with some of the people like that about, the David Frums. Great. I'm glad David Frum is going to pull the lever for a Democratic congressperson. But what army is he bringing? Who cares?
None, and he helps set all this context. And, of course, none, right? Who cares? But at the risk of...
And I mean that literally. Like who? Like who is...
Democrats who read the Atlantic Monthly.
Yeah.
As literally who cares what David Frum has to say.
But do they actually care? Like, in other words, like if there was an absence of what Frum would do, would that change their perspective on this at all?
No, it would just give them that like little moment of, at least there's some.
They give it's a validating hit to
that's what I'm saying.
Anxiety.
If anything,
it's a bedtime story.
If anything,
it's
it
a
is
bedtime story.
Yeah, and maybe the problem is that they shouldn't be going to sleep. Maybe they should be up all night with anxiety until they come to the realization that we need to do something, that it's not enough that the David Frums are coming to our side. And by the David Frums, I mean the David Frum. That guy.
David Frum and the other,
there's four other ones.
Guy who's on TV.
There's four others.
Former consultants who've parlayed it into great cabled gigs.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, good for them. Very well played.
You're not even going to win like a local councilman election with that swing that you've created.
No, you're not. But I do think, if you look at the pipe bombings and Bolsonaro, fever's going to break.
There you go. Now
when he starts ethnically cleansing leftists and LGBTQ people have to flee to the border, they'll realize that this just isn't going to work in the 21st century economy.
When he starts torching the Amazon to get after those indigenous people, that's really when people are going to sit up and be like, you know what? Knock it off.
This isn't who we are. This isn't what Brazil wants to be. It's not who I want to be. I don't want to be an unemployed pizza delivery guy putting pipe bombs in the mail, George Soros. This isn't who I am.
All right,
I actually like that lesbian I work for. Fever broke. Wait, you're doing a bris?
I mean, it'd be
maybe
nice.
Instead of shooting all of you, I can learn about your customs.
It'd be nice if the world worked that way.
Fevers are gonna break. Well, I think Obama's particularly terrifying because he's so intelligent, and there is something
I actually think that, look, at least there's an argument that when Obama goes and makes these speeches, that he's actually going to motivate people to vote.
Oh, no, he has to make these speeches. I'm thinking of, I think the sincere belief that maybe he used to have. I don't get the sense that he still has this belief, but the sincere belief that he used to have of fever's going to break. I think now he actually is, in his own way, being like, this is actually pretty fucking bad.
Right.
Ideology is a powerful thing.
Yeah, so is being a black guy.
All right, quick break, head into the fun half. You can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajority.com. Don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Tomorrow, Michael on Michael Brooks Show.
Big Waz, my fellow woke bro and I, he's going to join us from L.A., and then Harvey K's in studio, Thomas Paine, History of the Democratic Party. We're talking about what's happening in Brazil, and then what's really exciting is actually in Vermont, Bernie Sanders and Yanis Varoufakis later this month, or later in November, are launching an international left project to counteract the right. So we're going to talk about that. And there's also a big announcement that we're making tomorrow, so be ready.
Jamie?
Yeah, so today we just released for our patrons a little comic relief in the form of a Real Maoist Hours. This segment is normally called Real Tanky Hours. We kind of plumb the depths of the dumb far left internet, but this one's the Real Maoist Hours. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not. But we found a leaked document for a plan for a protracted people's war in the Florida Everglades. So we do a little reading of that. And dropping on Wednesday, we have a very special Halloween episode with the Lit Crit guy about Gothic Marxism, horror movies, and how the left can use the Gothic for our own liberatory ends.
Matt.
Literary Hangover, still on that Pequot War / Mystic Massacre episode that I did solo. I got a really good review of it. She said it was very excellent. It's my mom. She's listening to my podcast. So
congratulations.
And then she's
where it starts.
Her and my dad are going to listen to it together, apparently. So shout out to them. And check it out, patreon.com/literary hangover.
There you go, Matt, bringing families together. All right, folks, quick break. We'll see you in the fun half. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. The number is 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920 is the number. So earlier, we had referenced the some of these folks who were in line waiting to see Donald Trump in Wisconsin, and the idea that they're going to get that there is any hope that these people are going to get some type of message about how problematic it is that Donald Trump's rhetoric has essentially inspired a bomber. And, this is Charlotte? Okay, yeah, sorry, this is Charlotte. And I imagine not much of a difference. But if you had any notion that somehow folks are the fever is going to break or the craziness is going to go away if Democrats control Congress, I mean, understand, it's definitely going to be helpful from our perspective. I mean, hugely helpful, right? It's like, but just since it's Halloween, I want you to imagine the Friday the 13th guy coming at you with a chainsaw. In this instance, Congress is like, a baseball bat or maybe even like a sword that you can stop this person and mitigate it. But it's not going to make that person any less crazy. It's just going to give you a tool to end them, or mitigate the damage they can do. But it's not going to make them any less crazy. And in fact, there's an argument it's going to make them more crazy. You just got to hope that the tool you have is going to be up to the challenge. And if the people wielding that tool think that that person's going to be less crazy, that's a problem because they're not going to wield that tool properly. But here are some folks from Charlotte, North Carolina, waiting to see Donald Trump, what their perspective is on this whole bomber thing.
Just because somebody has a Trump sticker on their car doesn't mean they're a Trump fan. You could turn, it doesn't mean nothing.
Barack Obama probably sent his to himself, and Hillary Clinton probably sent hers to herself.
Pause it. I just want to go over what we've just heard. The first guy wearing a Trump hat, who turns out coincidentally to be a Trump fan, says that just because there's stickers on the van doesn't mean that he's a Trump supporter. Now, I don't know if this guy had access to his TV or could see all the pictures of this guy at all the rallies. But the idea being that maybe this is not only just a false flag, it's also they've created an entire false identity for this guy. And then the next guy says Obama mailed it to himself and Hillary Clinton probably mailed it to herself. They probably got on the phone. They were probably texting each other or emailing from her server in her bathroom okay, remember on Friday or Thursday, that's where we're going to send each other these bombs, crisscross.
I bet they had a secret Santa sort of system set up.
That's probably the way too. Like, we won't know who it comes from. It's all going to be secret. Everybody's going to pull their name out of a hat, and you're responsible for sending a pipe bomb.
Throw mom off the train of Soros conspiracies. Let's get going.
Barack Obama probably sent his to himself, and Hillary Clinton probably sent hers to herself.
So you don't think this guy actually sent these bombs to these officials?
No, probably not.
Why?
They probably had it done. They may have paid him to do it.
There's radical people on all sides. There can be people that are problem creators. They create problems. Like, people on the left can create them. People on the alt-right can create them.
I think I heard something about it being Bernie Sanders supporter. There's so much news going on right now that people don't know what to believe, so they stick with what they know.
Yeah.
Let me go. To my friends in the conservative movement, he was a Trump supporter and he sent the bombs. There isn't any doubt, nor has there been any responsible Republican to say anything other than that.
Oh, my God. Where do we have a list of all the people who said false flag at the beginning? Now, of course, definitionally, right, Hugh Hewitt is saying no responsible Republican leader. Well, yeah. It's just that, unfortunately for you, a lot of your colleagues are highly irresponsible. And I guess it's definitionally what constitutes a leader or a major figure in that world. I mean, every single one of them had kissed the ring of Rush Limbaugh.
There's definitions by which these people still try to say that Trump isn't a conservative leader.
Right.
I mean, I've seen all sorts of games by how they play those definitions.
And then the next move there is to blame him on the voters.
Right. Exactly.
Let's go to the phones.
I don't know. I just think after 3 Halloweens, Mike Myers is going to say, is this really who I want to be?
Exactly. Oh, yeah, here it is. Ann Coulter, James Woods, Geraldo Rivera, Candace Owens, Bill Mitchell, Rush Limbaugh, Mike Savage, Lou Dobbs, Mike Flynn Jr., Dinesh D'Souza, Kurt Schlichter, Laura Loomer, Jacob Wall. Oh, I guess it's wrong for us to include these people. It's not like, for instance, Donald Trump just retweeted and said an interview with Dinesh D'Souza was interesting, literally like a day ago. It's not like, Candace Owens is invited to the White House or Geraldo Rivera is in touch with them or any of these people are considered, Trump Jr.
liked one of the tweets, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, Trump Jr. liked one of the tweets.
But he's not
Michael Flynn Jr. was a member of the Trump administration.
Dad.
Rush Limbaugh gets invited to every major Republican event that exists. On and on and on. Let's go to the phones. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. What's on your mind?
First of all, congratulations, Sam. And you owe my Chicago White Sox a debt of gratitude from last night's 3 outs.
Oh.
The last 3 outs of last night, I shall say. So just throwing that out there, Sam.
Well, I appreciate it. Sal was not the force that people thought he would be, but it was a nice way for him to finish.
I thought it was pretty good. Anyways, so I want to say, listening to those comments about the Republicans who are in complete denial over this sort of attack and these attacks that we've seen recently, a lot of them actually have their sort of at least roots in sort of these classic anti-Semitic conspiracy either takes or racist tropes where it's a conspiracy or a cabal or something like that. I heard someone mention that it could have been a Bernie Sanders supporter or something like that. And I think it's important to know and to note especially is that for me the thing that's stoking this anti-Semitic racism, anti-Semitism and the racism that you see isn't necessarily Trump. It's the Republican Party, the Republican base, especially when you see people like DeSantis in Florida, where basically Trump just using maybe they aren't as charismatic or as over the top about it, but they are just as racist. And so I think for me, it's on, and I think you guys do a good job. It's crucial for people to call out the Republican base as being the people who are stoking the rise in anti-Semitism, especially these attacks. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, he gives a certain amount of license, and it is quite clear, you don't need to have a PhD in this stuff, although you should read people who have PhDs in this stuff. When the President of the United States basically gives an A-OK for and says stuff like, there are good people on both sides, it gives a tacit green light for this stuff, and it grows. And when Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan or any Republican senator, for that matter, I mean, the House members, yes, but the senators have more of the power. When they refuse to expend what they have as assets in trying to criticize and shut down the president, because it would not be profitable for them, depending on how you want to measure it. Yeah, they're all responsible.
Yeah. And I would just add one last thing, too, is that, for me, Trump has just been saying subtextually what the Republican Party, or Trump has been overtly saying what the Republican Party has been subtextually saying, whether it be with anti-Semitism or just straight up racism for years. To me, this is like a natural build.
People can go back and listen to what we were saying on this program in July or June of 2015, whenever Trump announced. It was Donald Trump. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm quite sure I said something to the effect many times that the Republican Party had stitched this suit and Donald Trump just fits it. That Donald Trump is not the catalyst for this stuff. He is the symptom of this stuff. He is the natural progression of where the Republican Party has been. That it's just like now, that sort of that disease that was on the inside is now just manifesting on the outside. He's just a rash, to the virus that lives within the conservative movement. And I mean, yeah, we've been saying that for a long time, and it has been to my constant aggravation that there isn't more understanding of that there's still this attempt to make Donald Trump sui generis in the context of the Republican Party. Maybe the one thing that is unique about him is that he's a politician with completely who is so unstable that, there are some that have to corral him in terms of just like doing the best, to maintaining some measure of stability. But beyond that, I appreciate the call, Josh.
Mike Myers has to ask himself, is this really how I want to spend my life? I think when the next Halloween comes around, he's going to say to himself, I don't want to stalk that girl anymore. I want to do something better, something different in my life.
Or maybe he needs to catch the girl. Well, and then once he does, and he goes like, this is not fulfilling. I'm not going to do the next girl.
Here's what's going to happen. He's either going to catch her or we're going to protect her. But either way, the fever's going to break.
Right. So here is an example of where these elites could push folks like Paul Ryan. Now, Paul Ryan goes on the Sunday show, Face the Nation with John Dickerson. And Dickerson pushes a little bit. And I think he pushes, relatively speaking, as much as you'll see anybody in the media press.
He also did a good job recently with Mitch McConnell's lies about the filibuster.
Yes. But there needs to be more. Because if the Barbara Boxers and all of the Democratic senators are willing to sacrifice the Senate committee and get more pointed in their blaming the enablers of Donald Trump, then folks like John Dickerson, they'll go even further. He doesn't do this in a vacuum. He is X distance out from where the sort of like, the safety lies. And if safety lies further out and more aggressive in terms of questioning and holding these people to account, then folks like him will get more aggressive. Here he is on Face the Nation with Paul Ryan. And this is, when is this? On Sunday, right? Yeah. This is the day after the shooting.
You've seen some President Trump's rallies. Do those rallies accentuate the things that unite us, the bipartisan achievements, or are they, do they do something very successful in politics, wildly successful, which is sow division in the country?
Yeah.
Do you see that happening at his rallies?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes meaning?
Well, not always, but sometimes. I worry about tribal identity politics becoming the new norm of how politics.
Pause it for a second. Excuse me. So sometimes at Donald Trump's rallies, you see this? Sometimes. Sometimes? Is that most of the time? Or just like all the time?
Sometimes I'm a good boy.
Or does he mean sometimes I watch Trump rallies and every time I do, I see that? But I only watch it sometimes, so I can't say all the time.
That's what he's saying, because, Paul Ryan's a big fan of I didn't see that.
Right.
I'm just trying to cut the Koch brothers'
taxes. I took Twitter off my phone,
yeah.
And I cut the cord on cable, so I don't see anything. And
trying to live a more mindful life.
Anymore.
Going to Walden Pond.
Yeah. All right, go back just a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes meaning?
Well, not always, but sometimes. I worry about tribal identity politics becoming the new norm of how politics is waged. As conservatives, we always thought this was sort of a left-wing Alinsky thing, Unfortunately, the right practices identity politics now as well. It's
Pause
the day and
it. So let me just get this straight. At what point did this left-wing Alinsky thing happen on the right? Was it when the former Speaker of the House, John Boehner, refused to tell members of his caucus, don't push the birtherism story? Please don't introduce legislation about birtherism. Was it then? Was it the entire cult built around the idea that Vince Foster was killed 20 years ago? I mean, I would go on and on.
And conversely, was the Alinsky thing when Obama said that he would pay people's legal fees if they punched people at his rallies? Was that when that happened?
New Black Panthers, I got you covered.
Yeah. Oh, what? Is there a honky in the crowd? We breaking some mayo? I got the bills covered. I got a special endowment from Saudi Arabia for that shit.
There's my white guy.
He gets
my
it.
white guy. He gets
He gets it.
it.
He gets it.
He gets it.
What's up, Billy Bob?
There you go.
The right practices identity politics now as well. It's the day and age, it's technology and everything else. Identity politics, which is now being practiced on both sides of the aisle, is unfortunately working. And I think
pause it. Just there's one party, incidentally, that is made up of one identity. Not total, not 100%, 95%. There's one party. That is the Republican Party, made up of 95% white people. Continue.
I think we, as leaders, we got to figure out how do we make inclusive aspirational politics strategically valuable again.
You've talked about inclusive politics.
There he is, Paul Ryan, admitting that it is not in our best interest to make politics more inclusive. Like I say, there's one party that is 95% one identity. There's another party, in terms of like measured by elections, at the very least, where 40 some odd, 5%, 40% is white. There is
it's all the identities
men
that like
and
identity
women
politics.
And all the other identities. Huge mix.
A lot of identities. A lot of people.
Strategically valuable again.
You've talked about inclusive politics, which tries to unify. Does President Trump practice those kind of politics?
Sometimes he does, and sometimes he doesn't.
Pause it. Oh, are there times where Donald Trump is inclusive? Oh, that's right. He said, "There's my black."
Right. There's times when he's like, "Black people love me.
Some of them
and
are
everybody
good people.
should be nicer to me."
I had Kanye. Yeah. I got Kanye.
I got him. Hey, Kanye, let me ask you a question.
There is a party that already is incentivized to have inclusive politics. There is already one of those parties. There may be other things wrong with that party, not necessarily from Paul Ryan's perspective, but from mine. But the one thing they do is inclusive politics.
And sometimes he doesn't.
But I mean, come on, honestly.
I mean, sometimes look on economic growth and on tax reform, on getting the military and helping veterans. Those are things that he has led us to that have really brought people together. And he talks about these at his rally, and that is inclusive.
Pause it. No. First of all, John Dickerson has to be like, what? Really? Seriously? Oh, let me make up a couple of things that are Republicans like the tax cuts. The tax cuts are less popular than Obamacare. The tax cuts are less popular than Obamacare. Obamacare has 51% support. The tax cuts have somewhere around, 40% support. The vast majority of it is Republican. Give me a break. It's nuts. Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 352 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, Keith from Florida.
Hello, Keith from Florida. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I'd just like to kind of put in 2 points. On your overall initial point before the break, the whole, noticeable anti-Semitism in Trump started before the election. He openly courted and went on to InfoWars and said he would make them proud, and there's not, many more bigger anti-Semites than Alex Jones. Not any that openly promoted anyways. And another point that I see cropping up today is because Trump or Ivanka has Jewish children, that it's impossible for them to be anti-Semitic or support anti-Semitism. I'm not quite sure on how to kind of debunk that argument, but it's one I think that is, they're playing into already that I see, and that, needs to be kind of somebody, that could better explain it than me kind of handle that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's ample examples in the past of people who have people who are Jewish in their family exploiting anti-Semitism for their own benefit, and we can parse whether or not that makes you an anti-Semite. But if you are okay with stoking racism, with stoking anti-Semitism, with stoking misogyny in society for your own personal gain, you just might be a racist, anti-Semite, misogynist.
We need to get much more back into the just functional use of these terms. Like,
appreciate
even like
the
this
call, Keith.
Bannon conversation. To me, it's like, I think it's utterly secondary. I would even stipulate that Steve Bannon is not, okay, he personally says he doesn't have an issue with black or Hispanic or Jewish people or whatever. Okay, fair enough. But he harnesses it to advance his politics, so therefore he's functionally racist. That's all that matters.
The outcome is the same.
Yeah,
and
it's so the same with Trump and his family stuff.
And that's a point I should have made before when I was sort of questioning whether Trump understood this kind of anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that he was parroting. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the outcome is the same.
And it's not just even that the outcome is the same, it's that your willingness to use this means that you are willing to sacrifice the well-being of people, broadly speaking, specific people, broadly speaking, and you necessarily don't care about them. And
I was reading Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, and he talks about Southern politicians during Jim Crow, and often, even they didn't have quite as, early on, they didn't have as awful of attitudes as they had. They just played it up because that's what got them votes. And then, later it sort of flipped around where you have to be more subtle about it. What is it, Atwater or whatever?
Right.
He played that in one of the first cold open history clips on the show, actually, of Atwater saying, you say N-words in our neighborhood in the 60s, and then by the 80s you talk about tax cuts and welfare.
Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
I'm Mindy. How are you?
Good. Listen, I'm probably not going to like this call, but I'm at the point now where I'm so disgusted with politics that if we don't win the midterms, I'm just feeling and my friends are too, we kind of just want to check out until 2020 and get back in, because it's taking a toll on everyone. I mean, are you feeling this?
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. In fact, I had this conversation with someone last night that there's this sense of you want to check out. If you're going to do any, legitimate self-care in this context would be don't follow this stuff and engage in it. But the problem is that it's not going to go away in that instance.
Right.
And there's no guarantee that it's going to go away if you stay engaged. But it's a little better odds than, say, winning the lottery. I mean, it needs people.
I don't know, I'm sorry, go.
Well, but I understand the desire, and I think the idea of taking a couple of weeks is important. I mean, frankly, that's what I try to do, to the extent that I have obviously a higher tolerance for this stuff than most normal human beings. But I still am, arguably human. And so I think that if, frankly, if I was doing, 5 days a week, if there wasn't, a day where Michael did this, and I'm still working, but I'm not like immersed, for half the day. I basically take a half a day off, and I do more sort of administrative stuff. I think I would have gone nuts by now, to be honest with you.
Right. So past your show, so now I'm down to listening to your show. I guess I watch Rachel 4 to 5 times a week, depending. And once in a while I'll catch Nicole Wallace or Ari Melber. And past that, and sometimes I'll watch Chris Hayes. But other than that, I'm like streaming like 90 Day and Michael. But past that, I'm like streaming 90 Day Fiance and watching like old episodes of, I don't know, Breaking Bad. I mean,
that sounds great. Just don't stop with my show, obviously. But besides that, more TV.
Yeah, maybe you want to add the Antifada to the rotation.
I think there is value in, consuming less media and going out and expending that effort in something that is, like real world constructive for 2 reasons. One is you're necessarily going to be adding something. It may be, butterfly wings type of stuff. But I do think like, the social media stuff, it does have it's toxic, but it does influence, I think, reporters.
You're doing good work on social media, Mindy. That's the truth.
But I also think.
Wait, hold on. Can I say something about that today, Michael? Thank you.
Wait. Let me just finish, Mindy. Let me just finish.
Why are you saying that?
I think there is value in going out, finding a local group, even if it's not necessarily totally aligned with your politics, that it's close enough in this day and age, and expending physical energy on whatever they're doing, because it will have some impact, positive impact, and B, there will also be opportunities to do, to have some socializing involved, which is sort of like simultaneous self-care.
Let me tell you, I did some door knocking for Medicaid expansion in Idaho, my friend Luke's campaign, and it was nothing was more refreshing than that, to be honest.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to do my share. I contacted my congresswoman. I have, I wanted to do work for her. She hasn't called me back yet. My girlfriend did door knocking the other day and canvassing, and they didn't give her any information. Like they just said go, just go. But that was okay. And I'm trying to do a lot on social media as much as I can. I mean, like you said, Michael, I have 57,000 followers. I mean, I can tweet something and get like a lot of traction on it. So this morning I put on my Twitter account, I'm not going to tweet any more bullshit about Trump. I hate him, whatever. He's anti-Semitic. I mean, all of those things are done. They're said. There's nothing left to say. There's no other way to rephrase it. And I said this morning on Twitter, I said, listen, everybody just drop a candidate into my Twitter feed, and I will retweet them all day long for the next 8 days. Just do that. So, I mean, so maybe there's 200 people retweeted or 300 people, but it could be the difference of making somebody vote. Somebody could just say it. I don't know. Or sometimes, on the other hand, I think we're kind of preaching to the choir.
Well, listen,
I don't know.
Listen, first off, I will tell you this, that I think going out and doing door knocking, even if it's inefficient, like I say, it could be annoying, could be worth a little bit, but at the very least, it's also, I think, literally for self-care, it's a good thing to do, to sort of localize this stuff enough so that, you can, you're not in this sort of toxic stew. In terms of preaching to the choir, listen, I know you are, but I'm saying, walking around, even if it's door knocking on some level, makes it, releases some of that tension. As far as preaching to the choir, it's not just that the choir votes. The choir is the ones who go do the door knocking. The choir is, all the people who are feeling burnout, that's the choir. And so they need that preaching.
My girlfriend the other day, wait, you got to hear this. My girlfriend the other day went and she went and canvassed with her husband for Helen Ty, the one I just said earlier. Her husband's black. And she went and door knocked, and 2 different people told her husband that he should not be knocking at doors because it's a toxic environment right now. I mean, she lives in the community. I mean, Democrats were telling her husband that he should get off the street.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but.
That's just, well, I live in a very red area. Really, really bad red area. So anyway, Sam, I will not stop listening to you, and my friends will not stop listening to you. I'm just, as far as everything else, I mean, just tweet to me when you're on Chris Hayes, and I'll put it on. But other than that,
okay.
I mean, I saw you with Barbara Boxer, and I was like, whoa, is she fucking crazy? Like, I heard what she said, and I was like, that was totally the wrong message she gave.
Well, thank you, Mindy. I'm glad. I
Mindy,
appreciate
not
that validation.
fucking around.
What?
I appreciate the validation.
No, really. So just tell me when you're going to be on Chris Hayes when I watch it. Other than that, I'm not.
I will.
I'm not watching it.
I'll put you on the distribution list. It's my parents and my aunt
put
Carol
me in the distribution.
Are very mad at me because I don't get.
Sam, it makes me happy to see you. You look cute, and I love you, and I love you too, Michael. I love you all. I'm just very depressed. I'm just in a bad place.
There's a lot of
folks. You think we're
folks.
going to take the house?
I think so. If I had to bet. Somebody keeps calling us. I don't know.
All right, have a good day.
All
Bye,
right,
guys.
bye.
What, Jamie?
Oh, I was just going to say, I really cannot emphasize it enough. Getting out in the real world and doing things will make you feel, both a little bit worse, but also a little bit better, right? Because I spend a lot of time on the IRL left, and I don't know that we're going to be able to transition to socialism in the amount of time that we have before we have an ecological crisis and some sort of social collapse. But at least I want to be able to say that I tried, and I'm trying really fucking hard. But also, I did take some time out to go to some Halloween parties over the weekend, and that was fun too. So it's a balance.
You're talking Mindy's language.
Calling from a 305 area code. Who's this?
Hello?
Hello?
Is that me?
Yes. Who is this?
Hi, Sam. My name is Itamar. I'm calling from Florida.
I'm sorry. What's your first name?
Itamar. It's an Israeli name.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm recently immigrated to the United States from Israel. And obviously I'm very depressed at what happened on Saturday. I never believed that something like that could happen in the United States, And I wanted to... I saw Ron Dermer yesterday, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, which is who is he's like a BB's puppet.
Yeah.
And he was praising Trump. He said, "Oh, Trump denounced this act. He used some of the strongest words I ever heard from a leader." And that made me so pissed, really, because Bibi is he's one of the worst. I mean, it's this new axis of evil. He's one of the worst.
I agree with you. Look, I mean, and when we talk about promoting this right wing fever dream that Soros is, sort of trying to drive these caravans up to the United States, ostensibly to destroy, U.S. white culture. Here is a story from Breitbart from April 2018. I don't know if you have this one, but here it is. It is a picture of Soros, Netanyahu. Soros-backed New Israel Fund seeking to, quote, erase Israel's Jewish character. It's the same story. We just completely...
Just a while back.
Yeah, this is back in April.
No, just a while back. I think it was last year. There's like 40,000 African refugees in Israel. And Bibi reached a decent agreement with governments in Europe to send some of the refugees there and spread them around Israel. Like half of them spread around Israel, half of them sent to the U.S., to Europe to resettle. And he canceled that agreement because he got heat from let's say, Judeo-Nazis in Israel. And then he said he blamed Soros for that. So he's spewing the same right-wing rhetoric in Israel. And I mean, I follow David Simon on Twitter, the creator of The Wire, and he spent the last week just arguing with Israelis on Twitter because it was like, fuck Bibi, fuck Naftali Bennett, the education minister. We don't want you here. And he got so much heat from Israelis, like, oh, how dare you compare the two. They're the same.
Yeah.
They're the same. I was a teacher for 7 years in Israel. I'm telling you, the younger generation is like a mirror image of the generation in the United States. They're much, much, much less open, much less liberal, and very racist, I'll have to say, very racist towards Arab and towards non-Jews. I mean, the kids in Israel now are practically ignorant about anything that has to do with, liberal democracy and liberal democratic culture.
Right.
To hear Ron Dermer yesterday praising Trump, like he's the greatest leader for the American Jews and stuff, I was sick to my stomach. And another thing that there was a caller before me that said, "Can you settle for me the fact that Ivanka is Jewish?" I will settle it for if you want. There are Jewish anti-Semites. I'm not saying she's an anti-Semite. I don't think she's that sophisticated for that. But there are Jewish anti-Semites. There's a philosopher, Yeshayahu Leibovich. I don't know if you heard of him. He coined the phrase Judeo-Nazis in the 60s. And he was talking about the mentality of Nazism, of a mentality, not necessarily the praxis, but the mentality of Nazism, which started in Israel after the occupation. But now I have to say the cancer has grown so big. And if you ask kids today in Israel, if they think the Jews are special, if they think that Jews have superior blood, a lot of them would agree. So the Nazi mentality, the Judeo-Nazis are. I mean, Israel will deny.
BB's son shares this stuff. I mean, directly, right?
Will deny entry. Sorry.
Itamar, I appreciate BB's son, is sort of like a Donald Trump Jr.
I mean, he literally shares this stuff, right? I mean, what you're talking about is shared by the Prime Minister's son.
Itamar, I appreciate the perspective. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you, man. You have the best show.
All right, thank you, man. Call back.
And I really would look at, again, he's a very complicated figure, but Ehud Olmert in another interview just a couple days ago again said, and it's a bit self-serving, but he's like, I was taken down by Sheldon Adelson, and he explicitly said right-wing Jews who did not want a deal.
Yeah.
And there's truth.
Of course.
There's a huge amount of truth to that. And they did it partially, it was an analog version of fake news. It's a free right-wing newspaper that Adelson flooded the country with. And part of the criminal investigation
that he owned, right?
That he owns.
Yeah.
And part of the criminal investigation with Bibi right now is trading media monopoly favors for good coverage.
So who better to defend Donald Trump on charges of anti-Semitism when Donald Trump gets up there and talks about, the globalists? That's rich. The globalists with their parentheses.
Globe emoji.
And I read earlier this piece from someone at the Southern Poverty Law Center, an African-American, who wrote this piece about how anti-Semitism animates white nationalism, right? It's the Jew who actually allows. The reason why African-Americans have any rights and the reason why women are ascendant in our society, the explanation for why the superior race of white people cannot completely subjugate everyone else is because there's an inside mole. There's someone inside who is undercutting the white supremacy, and that's the Jew. And that is the role that anti-Semitism plays in white supremacy and white nationalism in this country anyways, and maybe internationally. I mean, there is actually a history of anti-Semitism in Europe. I'm not sure people are aware of this. But who better to speak to the complete absence of anti-Semitism in the Bush administration than the guy who wears the lapel pin from the Order of Vitesse, which is a Hungarian nationalist group that was active from 1920 to 1944. It's an homage, right? Their leadership apparently was very eager to help Adolf Eichmann, who was the guy in charge of the trains and transportation of the Jews, in sending 400,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. So who better to speak about the complete lack of anti-Semitism in the Trump administration?
First, I'd like to point out the facts to them. Donald Trump's grandchildren are Orthodox Jews. His daughter converted to Judaism. Donald Trump is the first president in 23 years to keep our nation's promise to the people of Israel and to recognize Jerusalem as its capital and to move our embassy. So those are the facts. The only thing that is evil in this instance is the man who perpetrated this massacre and the anti-Semitism that he was propagating. Also, note that we now know from his social media that the perpetrator of this massacre hated the president as well. So we've got to stop the people who are exploiting tragedy for their own political purposes.
Right. We've got to continue to laud those people who are promoting future tragedies for their own political gain. And yes, this guy, this shooter, thought that Trump was actually not the nationalist that he claims he is. He's actually a globalist, even though he said this the other day. And of course, here, this is what Trump said.
Radical Democrats want to turn back the clock toward the rule of corrupt, power-hungry globalists. You know what a globalist is, right? You know what a globalist is. A globalist is a person that wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
So the idea that this shooter hated Donald Trump was exactly the same function that Donald Trump is using there, right? I'm a nationalist. They're globalists. They're controlling things. This guy completely bought into that dynamic. It's just that he thought that Trump was actually controlled by those people. He was a false nationalist. And that the Jews were actually acting upon him. But still, the idea that he was influenced by Trump at all is ridiculous. You ask me, am I an anti-Semite? Ask me if I'm an anti-Semite. Ask me if I'm an anti-Semite.
Are you an anti-Semite?
I am not a Marxist.
My father was not a communist.
This is actually a common thing on the alt-right. Reportedly, like they think that Trump is not sufficiently anti-Semitic.
When I wake up in the morning and I see that that beautiful Ivanka is being handled by that Jew, I literally get sick to my stomach. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we on now? Probably shouldn't have said that.
But they still view him as sort of a useful idiot.
They understand lesser evil voting better than
I was
going to
say, they actually have a beautiful talent to understand. I made this point in Idaho.
For them, it's actually more evil.
I made this point in Idaho. They understand the crucial importance of
lesser
more evil
anti-evil
voting.
guys.
Yeah, guys, lesser evil is still less evil.
Take the lesser anti-evil, okay?
Yeah,
Just
God,
take it, you idiots.
I tried to say this to these people in Boise at one panel. I was like, I saw a clip once of a neo-Nazi. Maybe I mentioned this on air before, but he literally said, he's like, I'm not going to say this right before the midterms. I don't think that helps. And I was like, that's fucking beautiful. Right. If only people on my side could learn from that. I admired it so much.
Now, for those people who say that there is a long tradition in the Republican Party for being anti-Semitic or racist, all I can say is it's still alive. And the way it manifests itself is by disenfranchising, or one of the ways, I should say, one of the ways that they disenfranchise black people. Now, you could say they're from their right to vote. You could say, well, look, it's just expedient for them because the vast majority of black people in this country vote for Democrats, and this is a way of making sure the Democrats don't beat us in certain races. And it's basically a twofer, too, because it's easier for us to disenfranchise black people just in terms of who will offend in our own constituency. Remember, there is one party that is all in on identity politics because they represent one identity. It is the white identity, by really any measure you want to use. And here is Stacey Abrams explaining the illegal voter purge that her opponent, Brian Kemp, who is running for governor, and also the guy in charge of the voting, Secretary of State, simultaneously. That's a neat trick if you can get away with it. Who has been purging tens of thousands of voters. Here is Stacey Abrams during that debate.
We now go back to Mr. Kemp to ask Stacey Abrams a question.
Well, Ms. Abrams, as you know, in a recent video, you called on illegals to vote for you in this election. I was actually shocked. I had to watch that video twice. It clearly shows that you were asking for undocumented and documented folks to be part of your winning strategy. So my question is, why are you encouraging people to break the law for you in this election?
Mr. Kemp, you are very aware that I know the laws of Georgia when it comes to voting. In fact, I am one of the foremost experts in the state on expansion of voting rights. And I have never in my life asked for anyone who is not legally eligible to vote to be able to cast a ballot. What I've asked for is that you allow those who are legally eligible to vote to allow them to cast their ballots. And in fact, we took you to court in 2016, and a federal judge said that you illegally canceled 34,000 registrations. You use the exact same system, the exact match system that is under dispute right now. Now, I realize that in the next response, you're going to say that it's a function of my organization because your tendency is to blame everyone else for the mistakes that you make. My responsibility as a leader is to see a problem and try to solve it. When I saw that we had 800,000 unregistered people of color in the state of Georgia, I started an organization that has reached into every county and increased those registrations. When I saw that people were being unlawfully denied the right to vote, I worked to make certain that we held you accountable. And as the next governor of Georgia, I will continue to do my job to make certain that every legally eligible vote that gets cast gets counted.
What identity politics?
Oh my God.
That was just pure identity politics. The way she was talking about safeguarding democracy and the Constitution was one of the most craven displays of divisive identity politics I've ever seen in my life.
I thought Kemp was going to come out and go, well, you know I've disenfranchised black people, so all you're doing is trying to get the vote for black people.
I don't know why people insist on organizing around their identity of democracy likers.
I think that's exactly how to, it's like, yeah, you're doing white identity politics. We're doing democracy.
It's like, how do you even debate somebody who views you as less than human? Because that's what's going on here. And if she loses this election, those results will not be legitimate.
She did a good job, I thought, in that instance. And don't look at him, essentially. Yeah. And he was just sitting there going,
yeah. Calm.
Well, and she's clearly been through this so many times with him. Like, she knew what his response was going to be because, like, and I haven't been paying as much attention as, like, Michael is to this race, but even I knew that was the two-step that he was doing.
Right, of course. And he had to watch it twice to figure out precisely how he was going to lie about it.
Let's go to.
She's great. I have to. I mean, between her and Andrew Gillum, I think that people really need to recognize that in addition to them both, I think being legitimate, and particularly her center-left candidates, the enormous power in those races of part of politics is symbolism, and that would be so good for the country right now.
But if she wins, it's going to mask a deep voter suppression and a deep.
It's not going to mask. Going to open it up.
Racist.
That's going to be part of her governing strategy.
Well, yeah,
she's going to open
certainly.
it up. They're going to be aggressive.
But in the moment, like if she wins in spite of it all, it's going to be amazing. If she loses, it will not be a legitimate loss.
Definitely.
I think there's a lot of places around the country you could say that. I think there in 2016 there's a decent argument.
Yes.
Jonathan Armour said on the IM, Sam, congrats on your Red Sox winning the World Series. Thank you. Thank you. It's been somewhat mitigated. The joy I should be feeling has been somewhat mitigated by the horrible nastiness of the era we're living in. But I have to say, this happened in 2004, too. I didn't even get a chance to watch that game. I was doing a night show at that time. I didn't get to watch those games.
But you had a couple of weeks, but there was a gap where maybe you thought for a couple of weeks the Sox did it and Kerry will pull it off. Because then the Sox won before the election, obviously.
Yes.
So you didn't think maybe that it was a good omen.
We tried to think everything.
Seems like a bad sign when these teams that are known for not winning World Series all of a sudden start, because the Cubs won right before Trump's election.
Yeah, that is a bad thing.
Well, the Sox now are not that team.
No, the Sox.
They're still kind of that team.
No, they're not,
dude.
They win now, dude.
What? They won 4 in the last 15 years.
They were still singing.
It's like every other year.
Here's Sam yesterday. Sorry, Brazil, but on a positive note, the Sox coming through.
Yeah, you got to get out there. You got to vote.
You got to vote. If you don't vote, then there's bad outcomes and whatnot. Oh, it was wicked awesome, dude.
You listen to Bill Simmons.
We have to make a decision about Wednesday, incidentally.
Oh, I'm all in for Wednesday.
I don't know.
I've got I think
2 years into his
Siri
presidency.
and Alexa are ready.
Right. 2 years. Oh, that's true. 2 years into his presidency, and Trump has yet to throw out a ceremonial first pitch. Only Reagan, who's just been shot, has gone longer. Also, David Pakman has pointed out that Trump has yet to visit an overseas military base as president. Such a beta male that he can't be around athletes and soldiers. I don't want to show anybody up by throwing a perfect strike. Sean, Sam, of course, the caravan is an invading force, and history is repeating itself. I'm surprised that you've never heard about when the Nazis invaded France to help them pick grapes. Nick the Liberal, doing what I can to take over the local Democratic Party and elect Democratic progressives. But God, it's a slow process without the likes of a Bernie driving it. I'm even voting for corrupt Dems like Menendez while holding my nose. Yes, well, good.
You got to vote for Menendez.
But the resentment against these delusional establishment types is building. 2020 cannot come soon enough. Yeah, I mean, I look, it is a long process, but it's really just a matter of, and the difficulty is, I think this is true within the Democratic Party. It's also true within the broader sort of body politic. The right of any debate is always going to have a little more sustaining, a little more ability, or I should say it's a little bit easier for them to sustain themselves because they get funded. I mean, this is a pretty crass way of putting it, but the reality is that, like, we saw this within the with the blogs, and there's a slightly different dynamic, let's say, within the context of YouTube and whatnot, but it's a sort of a slightly different story. But during the early 2000s, you had hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were starting blogs to talk about politics, and it was just not sustainable on the left because there was not the sort of resources that were poured into it. People have jobs. People get burnt out. They don't have the ability to pay for someone to fill in for a week, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's always going to be harder. It's always going to be harder because there's not going to be as much of sort of like the material resources, and maybe not even for you as an individual, but for those things that support you or people that support you. You know, it's, but keep up the good work. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. I'll blow you away with my knowledge of Social Security reports in the same David Price, Chris Sale were blowing away Dodgers hitters last night, girl. New human. The pundits try and slice and dice us into people who receive bombs and people who send bombs in the mail, but I see us as one America.
The pundits like to slice and dice us.
That's good. I may
As
have
white
to use
supremacist
that.
pizza delivery men who put pipe bombs on the mail and those who have to check their package so their children's limbs don't get blown off. But we know that behind all of that, there's one America.
Right. Reformed conservative. I don't know why it took so long for Miley to finally be convinced of this, but after this weekend, I'm now convinced that right-wingers are not redeemable. On Saturday, I posted something about how Trump was an a-hole for suggesting that armed guards in a synagogue would have stopped this. Apparently, since almost all my family and acquaintances are religious conservatives, this was too far, and I got bombarded with how I was being unfair to him. Even the ones that say they personally don't like him, but only like him because of the courts are full of shit because they can't even admit what he says is hateful, and they defend everything he says. Don't know what I'll do anymore when one side won't even try and seek out truth. At least I'll have some satisfaction seeing conservative tears when the evil socialist Gillum is elected for governor. Left is best. Congressional baseball fan. Pipe bombs? Is this who we are, America? We must never forget, never, that America's past has 9 position players on the ball field, so there's plenty of room for all-stars from both sides. Play ball, America. Chris Lopaco.
It was so
Since
hard
Trump
for
says
me.
We're under attack by refugees, and we've allowed our presidents to declare war without declaring war. Do you think he'll say there's a legit military threat posed by the refugees in order to open fire on them on the border? Before 2016, that might have sounded like hyperbole, but now I think that might happen. Well, we'll know in a month when they reach the border, if they end up reaching the border. TBMS alumnus. The Pittsburgh shooters' last social media message was something like, "Screw your optics, I'm going in." That has to be directed at a group or an individual. Who? That is the people on, what is it?
Gab.
Gab.com. He's like, I don't care what this looks like, I'm going to do it. #Condell. In Texas, the electric voting machines are switching the votes straight ticket voters. Many reports are surfacing of people voting straight party Democrat and having their vote switched to Cruz. There is an awareness about this. Apparently, it's a mistake in the operation of it. I've seen Judge Legum, I think, tweet about this. So check your vote, folks. Last week, the progressive youth-led organization Move Texas threatened to sue Hays County when they planned to close early voting site at Texas State University, despite students waiting in line for upwards 2 hours the first days of early voting. After they issued their demand, the next day, Hays County resumed polling on campus, as well as adding to. That's great. Going to the phones, calling from a 929 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Cole from Idaho. Man, I've been trying to call in for a long time.
Well, here you are, Cole. Let's not spend too much time dwelling on that. Let's get to the point.
I'm a little nervous. Sorry. I just wanted to talk about how insane it is that Republicans actually think these bombs were false flags. It's like they've been watching too much Alex Jones. It's absolutely disgusting how they try to say that every single time anyone on the right does anything wrong, oh, it's a false flag. Roy Moore with those little girls, oh, no, couldn't be. It's a false flag. Oh, Milo talking about how it's okay to be a pedophile, oh, no, it's a false flag. No, it's all fake, something put out by the Dems. You know, it's amazing how they support these flamboyant males like Milo, but they claim to be like alpha males. It's disgusting what I'm seeing. There's a bunch of cowardice men in America right now, and they're afraid of women and children coming in over here. Like, how much more cowardice can you be to be afraid of immigrants coming over here? Like,
Yeah.
are you that scared?
Well,
sorry.
I mean, that is the idea. They are afraid, and it's, of course, it's false. I mean, to just point out their cowardice or their hypocrisy is, I think, a little bit too narrow. I mean, and then there's something warped about the psychology there. There's no doubt. And there's definitely something about the psychology that comes from like a place of feeling on one level, sort of feeling that there may be like some type of internal deep self-esteem issue or lack of confidence. I mean, that's what Donald Trump is, right? I mean, Donald Trump is. That was one thing about that Anthony Adamerick's show that I thought really was just genuinely brilliant. Not the one thing, but that was I think like the peak of its brilliance was that it saw that inside Donald Trump was like a little scared 3-year-old, and I think that is very much about a conservative attitude. Like I've said for a long time, that conservatives have a Masada sort of complex where they think that they are, and Masada was the story of some Jews who I think were getting chased by the Romans at that time, and they basically went up to a fortress on a hill and lived there for 2 years. They were basically starved, and they were just constantly under siege. The conservatives have the same sort of mentality, that they're constantly under siege, but they're not. and so this is a problem, and it just the fear that they have of whoever it is changes. They're afraid of gay people. They're afraid of gay marriage. They're afraid of Muslims. They're afraid of women. They're afraid of immigrants. They're afraid of, the list keeps growing because every time someone gets taken off the list, somebody got to get added onto it.
Yeah, and they keep projecting everybody is a snowflake, but yet when the White House correspondent dinner, they're like literally crying over that, like a bunch of little crybabies. They say, "Oh, the NFL players are taking a knee. How dare they?" Crying like a bunch of little snowflake crybabies. But at the same time, you see these Republicans running around in American flag bathing suits. Like, how much more disrespectful can you be? But they want to complain about a man taking a knee in protest against police violence. It's absolutely disgusting how these people think. They want to cry about an F Trump bumper sticker on someone's window. Oh, they got an F Trump bumper sticker on their window. Like a bunch of crybaby little snotty, spoiled brat teacher's pet, tattletale little wimp.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it.
Well, I don't know about the teacher's pet thing.
There's crybabies, teacher's pet,
Thanks, Cole.
snobby bitches scared of caravans. It's new Obama. Scared. It's disgusting. They're stupid. They're scared. They're dumb.
Pathetic.
What's pathetic? They're watching too much
excuses
shows.
for men.
Yeah. Why don't you man up? Brody, you even left.
Calling from a 773 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
I'm fed up.
This be the former caller caller formerly known as Uchiwali.
Uchibang.
I'm the bloom up to damn angry black man.
The damn angry black man. All right, fair enough.
Damn angry black man. So let me tell you what I'm angry about.
Okay.
First of all, let me real quick. I wasn't very happy with MSNBC the last couple of days. To it, when you were on there earlier in the show before you were even on, Chris Hayes several times said alleged MAGA bomber and that this guy, the appropriate words, alleged, supposed, whatever. But once or twice there was the implicit assumption that the man was guilty in the way that people on the show spoke. And then I went on to watching Rachel Maddow, who I'm a fan of, after that. And she just like 2 or 3 times specifically said, was this guy working alone? And what was this guy's motive and all this? Yeah, people forget, especially an NBC show, shouldn't forget Richard Jewell.
Right.
Innocent people do get accused of doing things like that. We all need to remember that this man has been even accused in court yet, let alone convicted. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that Barbara Boxer argument you had, it's really maddening. You've got, I think you and I and other liberals often refer to what the conservative zeitgeist is these days is an echo chamber. It's becoming less and less and that, and more of a cult. You can't question dissent. They teach you, in a cult that the cult is always right and they're the sole source of truth. And you look at the way conservatives treat media, they're liberally biased, academia, liberally biased, Hollywood's out to get them too. Now, these days, they're even expanding it. You can't trust Google because Google's liberally biased.
Right.
That's all the harm of a cult. And to think that this cult is going to have their fever break just because they lost the House is ridiculous. They didn't have the presidency for 8 years, and they got worse.
Yeah, yeah.
So what is losing the House going to do?
It's going to make them worse. Everything's going to make them worse.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
there's only...
I don't think this ends. I'm still working on like the end, like the end game here, right? Like, I mean, it could be that the Democrats take the House and the Senate and the presidency in 2020, and they're not going to get any less crazy. The question is that are they going to, in an era where there's this sort of broad dissatisfaction with politics, are they going to be able to get back to power? That's really the only question. It's not they're going to get any less crazy. They're going to get crazier.
The only thing I think we can do at this point is to take away the money from the billionaires that fund this nutty outrage. We got to take the Mercers, the Scapes, the Ricketts, the Kochs, the Adelsons, the Freezes, and
without
the
doubt,
Steeles.
because guess what? They're going to have more money there. This is one of those things about once you get your first billion, your second one comes much easier, and so on and so on.
It's all hard work. There's not a dollar that's easier than others. It's
Yeah.
called entrepreneurship.
And think about the financial formulation, political and economic system that allows people to amass this much money in the first place.
Which one's that?
Okay, but
It's called corporatism and globalism.
Global.
If we did real capitalism, it wouldn't happen because there'd be competition.
Total competition.
Total competition.
oh yeah, before I go, are you guys going to play my bumper for me?
Wait, I forgot. Wait, hold on one second.
No, that stupid song. I need a real bumper. I've been calling the show.
Do we have a bumper?
Cold open.
Do we have
years ago?
Do we have a boat? Do we have an open? Do we have a bumper? I don't know that we have one. You're not under the impression.
I've been calling in since the show started.
Are you?
If Ronald Reagan.
Are you under the
Jeff from
impression that
Georgia
we
get 'em.
make these bumpers? We don't make these bumpers.
Well, somebody does. Don't make me angry. I'm already angry enough.
There you go. There's your bumper.
Oh, don't do that. Wait a second. Is that you're gonna get weird?
We're under 5 seconds.
All right. Appreciate the call, Uchi Wally. Thanks.
Did you like your bumper?
No.
See you later. We'll do better next time. Thanks, man.
He actually very much in need of a bumper.
We have
Agreed.
30 callers on the line. I am not going to get
a lot of people
to your-
not going to get calls.
There's a lot of people.
Sorry
on that.
about that. Sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, folks. Take some IMs, then we'll take one call, and then let's see. Ash, okay, did that. Attorney Andrew, the Halloween show this year is going to have to be bananas. When subtext has become text, the new subtext is just racist, sexist, and classist. Might I suggest a dumb left show to avoid listening to Sam just repeat the 14 words for 2 hours? Congrats on the
That would
Sox
be a
win,
lot
though.
of fun.
I'm sure it's
wow.
almost
That's
like-
amazing. That's amazing, Lavajato. That's so fucking amazing. Did you see that Stacey Abrams? She didn't take an opportunity to call Cory Booker a sellout in that answer. That was fucking disgusting. I want to do. I really want to do that show. I vote a strong yes on a dumb left show. You just be like, here's a clip from 2010. See the way Debbie Wasserman Schultz answered that question. So it's fucking disgusting. And then we can have like news reports like Donald Trump is actually like turning reservations in the concentration camps. Are like, yeah, and people should remember what Obama did.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a little newspaper selling report from Tanky Lena Dunham.
That would be so funny. He's like, oh my God, isn't that amazing? Slavajato. It's a corruption investigation. People are going to jail. That's fucking amazing. I want a T-shirt. And then meanwhile, they demonize fucking Tulsi Gabbard.
Half of Nebraska is on fire from a leaked pipeline. But Barack Obama did wait a long time before denying the permit. Right?
It would have been nice if he said no immediately, because I thought I was voting for a left-wing candidate, but I was voting for a fucking corporate.
All right. I just
we're in character.
But the problem is, like, I feel like that would just take more effort than I really want.
No, it wouldn't take any effort. It would literally like, you see this?
No,
you see his facial expression?
Trying to keep it funny would be difficult for me.
Oh yeah, you would be like, hey, you know what? That's another goddamn reason.
I would start arguing with my own.
Yeah, you would.
I would just be sitting there, just going like, God, this is a fucking note. I got to take this down to talk about this tomorrow. Angel, answer 8:15. I have a meeting with Senator Durbin this week. I don't get that. Retcon. Hey, Candace Owens was mentioned by the president in reference to the bombing being a false flag attack. Is Jamie part of the operation? Also, I love you, Sam. We love you. The world is mad. Sebastian Gorkuk. Why doesn't anyone ask moderate Republicans to explain what's wrong with their ideology that it led to Trump? Everyone seems to want to treat him as an Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, how did this lead to Donald Trump? Like, first of all, there is no left analog to this. No. There's nothing even remotely like it.
But fucking Jake Tapper is doing Louis Farrakhan stuff. That's what they have to reach to try to draw an analogy. Which, by the way, newsflash, Louis Farrakhan is right wing. Louis Farrakhan, in fact, practices right-wing identity politics. It's just flipped. I know that's extremely complicated for people like Jake Tapper to be able to figure out. But that's literally, it's like the guy is a social conservative, pro-religion, pro-market guy, and but he's black. And he doesn't like racism, so of course this is the Democratic Party analog. And Al Sharpton, I mean, I'm sorry guys, whatever you think of him, the ship has sailed. He's an MSNBC host.
Okay.
He has not been in a tracksuit protesting since the 80s, and even then it wasn't the same thing.
Regardless of what you say about Al Sharpton, the guy did not.
Nothing.
He ran for president.
Right.
He didn't even come remotely close.
Right. And by which the time he got some power in the Democratic Party, his profile had totally changed, and he was not that to begin with. And I would actually argue the questionable things that he did with regards to Jewish communities in the 80s, and the Jewish community did super questionable things here too. They were both playing what I would say was right-wing identity politics. They were demonizing minorities and arguing about market share, not social justice.
Yeah. And there's no real leftist analog to this, because even pro-revolutionary leftists like myself do not believe in lone wolf acts of violence. That's not the revolution. That's in no way collective, and it's not good praxis. So
right. And with all due respect, the Democratic Party is not going to elect you to be the nominee.
Certainly not.
I think maybe you'd have a shot at a vice presidential nomination.
We want Jamie back. Jamie back for praxis.
Jamie 2020?
Jamie for praxis.
Meme Botala, Atula. I like the tension between you and Barbara Boxer Friday on Hayes. Can you all make this a regular segment? Maybe call it the Cedar Box or Boxing Cedar? Lula's phallus. Hola, Sam. I hope you and especially Michael don't forget me now that Brazil is no longer a cause celeb in the West. I will miss the daily tingle of Michael's soft palate on my skin, but I always remember it. Viva Brazil.
Yeah, that's great. You should totally do coverage about the world's most preeminent political prisoner into a blowjob joke. Actually, I'm like one of the only people who probably approves of that. I think that's kind of funny.
I was going to say.
But we will
continue. The first time I've seen you sensitive about that.
That was so inappropriate. Don't ever make fun of Lula. Everything else is on the table.
Borderline insanity. When I was in middle school, 1995, you could shop in border towns in Mexico with your family. The last time I went, around 2008. The rights war and the cartels had rendered the towns no longer safe and no longer recognizable. This is just under the years following ISIS creation. They've done this in less than 2 decades. Now with internment camps of kids and active troops on the border, I wonder if it's not just the borders we won't recognize in 20 years. The military's function isn't rebuilding, it's defense. How can they possibly deal with the incoming human crisis in a way that's not violent? It seems to be the equivalent of calling in a SWAT team when your neighbor asks for a cup of sugar. Indeed, Loki 4191. Hey, Sam, hearing that Angela Merkel is stepping down, can you try and get someone on that? Maybe Tilo Jung from the Young and Naive podcast. Also, not necessarily too late to volunteer as a poll worker for the election. LA County residents should call 800-215-2666. Perhaps, I don't know if, we'll see over the next week or two. Colin from Nebraska. I usually don't listen to NPR, but this morning I decided to see how short my commute was. I still heard the shallowness of NPR's reporting. No mention of Lula and his imprisonment or his support among the people. No mention of the election numbers, yet they characterized the vote of the people as tired of corruption by the Workers' Party. Only cared to label Bolsonaro as far right. Thanks, MR and TMBS, for in-depth coverage and all the things considered in Brazil.
Yeah, cancel your donations, folks.
Yeah, seriously. And thank you, Jimmy Dore, for doing an NPR-style segment about that. And thank
great.
you, by the way, I guess...
Sure, I controlled the Brazil. Oh, I have so much power. I changed the outcome.
I'm just
in
a
Brazil.
fucking jerk-off comedian, so I endorse a fascist lawfare coup backed by the United States.
Classic neoliberal play to say that I'm in charge of Brazil.
What, are you blaming me for the election?
Oh,
now?
so it's my fucking... You're segment shaming me?
I don't have the power, and I try to do a third party.
So I say vote for the fucking Green Party, and then, and Bolsonaro's rule. Oh, and also I want to say, I didn't know this, but apparently, TYT, who I'm obviously much more friendly with, they did some credulous coverage of Lava Jato as well, and shame on them for that too. So total consistency. People happen to very specifically point my attention to the Jimmy Dore video because people like to instigate that stuff. But fuck him.
Ronald Reagan. Sam, on Friday, I called and made a joke about Jimmy Reefer Cake. I feel bad for disparaging a member of the MR family and have already reached out to apologize personally to Cliff Schechter for the comparison. But Siri...
Can we really play...
But seriously, apologies to Jimmy and to 10-Foot Man for the joke. It was mean-spirited, and I promise to be nicer from now on. Well, I'm sure Jimmy has a good sense of humor and also appreciates the stress that Ronald Reagan is under.
I'm sure Jimmy will take it in stride as he does so much.
Glass Siegel. Do you have thoughts on the seeming contradiction of high-profile Jewish people who support the GOP versus the deep anti-Semitism of its base? The first group just doesn't care, right? I heard some story, I think I mentioned this the other day, about like an Israeli general who was confronted with the idea that they're getting support from all these Christian Zionists in the United States who want, to support Israel because they want, 2/3 of the Jews to burn in hellfire. And the Israeli general was like, yeah, we can have that argument later.
This is what
we'll take the support. We'll have the argument later.
Palestinians
I mean, I think that's, strange bedfellows, right? I mean, that's what that means.
And you could kill the
All right.
Palestinian now.
Final caller of the day. I'm sorry. We literally have another 29 people who are online. Call from a 412 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Justin from Pittsburgh.
Justin from Pittsburgh. What's on your mind, Justin?
Just wanted to vent a little bit. It's been a heartbreaking couple of days here. What happened there in Squirrel Hill.
Right.
That's a great community. I just feel really bad for those people. And I don't know, you hear Trump right after that. They ask him at the press conference of course he starts talking about victim blaming, basically, about how they don't have any, protection inside the synagogue, how ridiculous that is. Just completely absurd. And it just brings me to a larger point about, this shooter. It's a little surreal. He lives like a mile away from me, it turns out. And then, he has, of course, an AR-15 taken with him. He's talking about his guns, describing them as his family on Gab. It's just this broader gun culture that's just disturbing to me. It just feels hopelessness, like it's never going to change. And I don't know. I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, I appreciate the phone call, Justin, and Our hearts go out to folks in Pittsburgh, obviously, and it's going to take time, and I don't know that it's going to get better before it gets a little worse. I think that's probably the case. We just have to, it's going to take time. There have been generations and people in this country who have faced, in many respects, a lot worse, and they have made it through. But there's also time for it to get a lot worse around here too. So appreciate the call, though. Hang in there.
Solidarity with Pittsburgh.
Thanks.
All right, folks. That's it for the calls. I'm sorry.
I say the Democrats filibuster Bolsonaro, nominate Assad Shakur to the Supreme Court, but they won't because they're fucking cowards, and all you do is back them.
Gotta do this show.
It's the only way. Dum left in Brazil.
Dum left in Brazil.
We could do the whole show in Portuguese.
Yeah,
Can you find I'm just a dragon?
Wow. That's kind of I don't know. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I want to get a Lava Jato t-shirt.
Folks, it's the end of the show. We're allowed to do this. Black Marxist. We're going to take 5 or 6 or more of these. Black Marxist. Despise excuse-making for Trump voters by the Bernie left. Look at what they said about the Obama Soros being bombed. Also, is Hillary that delusional where she wants to run? I don't even want to talk about that today. Metaflight. I honestly, please, let's not talk about it. Let's just pretend like we'll do that in the umbrella thing tomorrow.
Fair enough.
Metaflight. I can't. I can't. Metaflight. Hey, Michael, how do you feel about what the IRM on Thursday asked about that hypothetical intervention in Brazil if, say, Bernie became president? The Amazon is a massive carbon sink. We can't afford it to be damaged anymore, even targeted economic sanctions, because civilian hardships that often considered an end, to put it one way. It's not like the Kurds are relying on targeted sanctions to protect them. P.S. Bernie voted for intervention in Kosovo, and the situation looks even grimmer than that.
I don't support a military invasion of Brazil, but there's a huge amount that can and must be done through sanctions. But look, the bottom line is that petrochemical companies in Wall Street supported this candidacy, and until you get that under control in an international way, it's not going to make any difference. And yes, he's explicitly said that not a centimeter of the Amazon will be left standing, and he doesn't recognize indigenous sovereignty. So that has huge implications. I don't know. I honestly think, from my perspective, understanding the war against the Workers' Party, the coup against Dilma, and the imprisonment of Lula has a lot of lessons for the left, actually, because even some of the things that we've seen in 2016, they harnessed an anti-austerity protest to advance a rightward agenda. And we need to understand and have solidarity. And there does need to be sanctions, but I don't think it's going to be military intervention, no.
Chris Burdick, I believe Trump mailed himself that piece of toilet paper that he got stuck to his shoe. Classical conservative. In the same week the Pittsburgh massacre, Israeli foreign minister stunningly denounces Soros to bolster the image of Hungarian authoritarian Orban and gloss over the anti-Semitic rhetoric best illuminated by the "Let's not Soros have the last laugh" billboards. Ram Saint, greetings from Mississippi, MR crew. There are indeed liberal-minded people here in the South, but I want to point out the overwhelming sense of apathy felt in places like this with few economic opportunities, even for the educated. Many of my friends in the millennial range or otherwise moral people should be diametrically opposed to the far-right Republican agenda, are so disillusioned and desperate, it's like they feel there's nothing they can do. They don't vote because as a deep red state, they believe their vote won't even matter. It becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, because they just don't contribute. I know Mississippi won't be a swing state ever. I just wonder if you have suggestions for how to form the message to make people actually care about the future of the world when it's being dismantled all around them. Maybe the idea is, frankly, in states where there's a sense that we're never going to be anything but deep red, is to try and organize to support candidates in other states. You have skill sets. You can support candidates in other states in times when it's not elections. You can support various sort of labor groups or people working at certain places. Like, I don't know, go down to the local, fast food place or something like this and, see how you can support the workers there. Who knows? You get, the upshot is you don't have much to lose in terms of like failed experiments in those contexts. And, you're building, maybe you build some type of social structure.
I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to in some of those places with zero platform compromise running as a Republican. Just the hell of it. Why not?
There are so many things that people can do. Like, obviously, tell your friends to vote, but also if they want to improve their immediate circumstances, form a union, join a union. If you find that hard to do, there are people whose job it is to help you. They're just one of many things.
The International Herald, February 1939, 3 months after Kristallnacht, 8 months before Germany invades Poland, Nazis sell out Madison Square Garden. And the final IM of the day. Hold on here. Gonna have a sound problem in a minute. Winnipeg Craig, Sam, where did you get the 40% support for the tax cuts figure? I could have sworn it was just below 30. It could be. It may be lower than 40%. I apologize for that. Thank you for the correction. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and out of